We started a series with you a few weeks ago in the whole Christmas series talking about all the King's men, and I hope that you had a great Christmas. So here we come. This is the first Sunday after Christmas, and there's all kinds of emotions that go along with the first Sunday after Christmas. I'm just kind of curious here. Let's take a kind of an informal poll. How many of you were just blessed at Christmas time with enjoying the wonderful manna of heaven called lefsa? Raise your hand. Lefsa? Any lefsa eaters in here? Oh, so few of us. How many have no clue what lefsa is? Raise your hand. Let me tell you what it is. When you read in the Bible, and the Israelites came out of Egypt, and God rained down for them something from heaven that was all over the ground, and it was this miracle food for them that they ate for 40 years. In Hebrew, it was called manna. In Norwegian, it's called lefsa. Hallelujah. And all it really is a sugar and butter dispensing system. But we love it. It's just great. So I hope you had a good Christmas. We had a phenomenal time with family. So glad that you're here. How many of you, I'm just kind of curious, how many gave a chia pet to somebody for Christmas? Raise your hand. How many received a chia pet for Christmas? Raise your hand. Okay, we're good. We're all safe there. Let me ask you about Christmas presents a little bit. Teenagers, just listen up here for a little bit. You don't have to be honest at this point in the sermon. This is the only point in the sermon you don't have to be honest. How many pre-opened Christmas gifts this year? Anybody pre-openers? Any pre-openers? Do you know what I mean by pre-opening? Like you snuck into wherever the Christmas gifts are kept or wrapped and you peeked. How many peekers do we have? Raise your hand. You guys, only one. You're the only one that peeked. Does anybody know that you looked here? Does anybody know? He does now? Wow. Well, let's have an interview done. That would be awesome. Really? That's awesome. That's great. So we've got a peeker in the crowd. That's great. Here's the big question. Don, did you get caught peeking? Just now, you did. Okay, all right. So anyway, here maybe all of us have been peekers at some point. We've sure been curious about something. We've all been caught doing something we shouldn't have been doing. It might have been unwrapping the gift a little bit before Christmas. And the reason we got caught by somebody is because somebody came into the room when we weren't expecting them to come into the room, right? I mean, it's really not that difficult to figure that whole thing out, but we thought we were going to get by with something, be it opening a Christmas gift or something else, and we didn't get away with it because we got caught because somebody walked into the room when we weren't expecting it. So that's a principle that's involved in the message that I'm going to share with you a little bit this morning. Or you went looking for the perfect gift. How many maybe you look, I mean, we all look until we find the perfect gift, and if we don't find the perfect gift, what do we buy? A chia pet, right? I don't know what to buy, so I get a chia pet. All right, so that's what we do, those kinds of things. We look and look and look. We search and search and search until we find what we are looking for. How many of you go through the gifts under the tree before Christmas to do a little inventory? Any inventory people here, like counting presents? You guys either are all saints or dishonest, one of the two. I don't know. How many counters do we have here? Like you go under the tree, okay, that's good. That's really being honest. Because you look, you want to know. How many were disappointed when you opened presents this year? Any disappointed people? I heard of one person that opened up a phone. It was an iPhone box, and when they opened the iPhone box, there was a decorative dish on the inside. How many know that would be a disappointment? All right, that'd be really a big disappointment. Let me tell you that what I'm going to share with you this morning is a gift that will not disappoint anybody. There's an amazing principle about looking, seeking, finding, and even being caught off guard that we're going to find in the Christmas story. And we're going to finish our series today as we talk about this Christmas story. If you brought a Bible, you brought a device with you, turn to Luke chapter 2, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You'll find it in the New Testament part of your Bible. Luke chapter 2, and we're going to begin towards the end of that chapter. There is an obscure figure that's really connected with the Christmas story that I don't know if I've heard it preached very often myself, even heard this man mentioned, but he's kind of an obscure figure in the Christmas story. His name is Simeon. And Simeon is connected with the birth of Jesus Christ, and we could read right beyond Simeon. And in fact, Simeon kind of gets sandwiched between the birth of Jesus and really the ministry of Jesus. And so he gets overlooked so often. And the principle that we're going to find in Simeon's life is that we tend to find, I know this is going to be deeply profound if you're taking notes this morning. This is really profound. You ready? We tend to find what we're looking for and we miss what we don't. I mean, that's really the principle of the story that we're going to share this morning. We find what we look for and we miss what we don't. When we get to Luke chapter 2, this is what's going on. Jesus has been born. And as Jewish ritual would have on the eighth day, that male child would be circumcised. And there was a reason they found medically, there's even a reason that it was the eighth day that was chosen, because there's something that happens within the child to the blood that helps the coagulation process and even the process of pain. So on the eighth day, that child is circumcised and given the name, as he was, Jesus. Now, the other part of the Jewish ritual was that you had to, on a certain day after the birth of your child, be it boy or girl, bring a sacrificial offering to the temple in order to be ceremonially cleansed from the impurity of that childbirth. Now, for a boy, if a boy was born, it would be 33 days after the birth, and if it was for a little girl, it would be 66 days after the birth. I don't know why. That's just the way God prescribed it. And so here we are in the life of Jesus Christ. Mary and Joseph have celebrated the birth of this newborn son. The shepherds have come and they've celebrated with Mary and Joseph on the night that Jesus was born, and gone to the temple, and they've done the circumcision ceremony. Now 33 days in, Jesus just over a month old. Mary and Joseph make a trek from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. I'm sure they can see the temple that Herod the Great had built. An enormous temple. Herod loved to build big buildings, and he rebuilt the temple of God for the Jews. And Herod himself was a half-Jew. And he rebuilds this magnificent structure. Some of the stones within are as much as 70 and 80 tons. As I mentioned maybe last week, that part of the wall of that temple still stands today in Jerusalem. Herod the Great had built this. It wasn't even completed when Mary and Joseph made their journey to Jerusalem that day. And Mary and Joseph, with this little bundle of wonder held in their arms, approached the city of Jerusalem. Probably they stopped somewhere to get what it was that they needed to sacrifice that day. It was 2 turtle doves, 2 little birds. So they would have purchased them probably from a vendor there somewhere as they came into Jerusalem, tired and weary from the journey. I imagine it is a bright, sunny, warm Palestinian morning as Mary and Joseph walk to the temple courts. A broad space before they walk to where the temple courts would be. Throngs of people coming to and from the temple and walking about that place. Mary and Joseph and little baby Jesus are but just 3 individuals amongst the hundreds, even thousands, that would walk through that place each day. And in the midst of that, there is the figure about which we're going to talk about for just a moment to discover a principle around the life of a guy named Simeon. So we're in Luke chapter 2, beginning in verse number 25. And here's what Luke records about Simeon. I think Luke recorded this. Perhaps it was Mary herself that sat down with Luke and said, "This is what happened. Let me tell you the story." And Luke, who is a physician, so carefully recorded the details in the events surrounding the birth of Jesus. At that time, there was a man in Jerusalem named Simeon. Now, he was a righteous and devout man who was eagerly waiting for the Messiah to come to rescue Israel. Now, there were a lot of people that were looking for a Messiah, but they were looking for a different kind of a Messiah. See, the Romans occupied Israel, and Israel was not much more than just a brown spot on the map that everybody wanted to avoid. And all kinds of conflict and turmoil taking place, and one nation would rise and take it over. It was the Greeks, it was the Romans, it was the Persians, it was all of these different nations. And so Israel had no national identity, and oh, if only we had a leader to lead us out of this Roman occupation. We want the Messiah. In fact, they read the Old Testament passages. They knew that some deliverer was supposed to come. But I think they were looking for the wrong kind of deliverer, except Simeon. Simeon is waiting for the Messiah. He is poring over the pages of Scripture to discover and understand whom it was that God would send to the nation of Israel. So this is Simeon. Verse number 26 says that the Holy Spirit was upon him and revealed to him that he would not die until he had seen the Messiah. No special empowerment necessarily. I think Simeon was just more sensitive to God. In fact, I think the Spirit of God speaks to us more often than we realize. The Spirit of God speaks to us when we know that we should say something, when we know that we shouldn't say something. When we know that we should get out a piece of paper and a pen and write that encouraging note, or pick up the phone and make that call. When we should either enter into this situation or get out of that relationship. The Spirit of God is upon all of us, I believe, church. Whether or not we're in step with Him is the question. Simeon was a man in step with the Spirit of God. The story goes on in verse 27. That day the Spirit led him to the temple. It wasn't as if there was some glowing figure that stepped into Simeon's house and grabbed him by the hand and pulled him to the temple that day. I think Simeon was simply a man who understood what it was like to just sit down and listen to the voice of God. And if only we could practice this more often as believers, followers of Jesus Christ, just understand and know that I think God talks to us a lot more than we give Him credit. I think God wants to speak to us a lot more than we think He wants to speak to us. So that day, Simeon, in some point in his days, quiet enough to hear the voice of God, that led him to the temple. And so when Mary and Joseph came to present the baby Jesus to the Lord, as the law required, Simeon was there. I don't think there's any such thing as coincidence in the economy of God. So this day, Mary and Joseph, Mary and Joseph, who look like anybody else. I don't think there was any shaft of light beaming down out of heaven onto baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph. I think they were probably wearing, an Under Armour shirt and Levi's jeans and walked right into the temple that day. Jesus is there still wrapped probably in his swaddling clothes, the strips of cloth to keep him warm and keep him secure. And Mary and Joseph that day walk in. And Simeon didn't know Mary and Joseph. Mary and Joseph didn't know Simeon. There's no indication of it, at least. Listening to the Lord. So there's an encounter that is about to take place between Joseph and Mary and Simeon that day. I thought to myself, what if Simeon hadn't listened? What if he hadn't listened to the Lord that day? What if he had just maybe been on with his own routine? He stayed home. I DVR'd my show last night, and I have to do this instead of just being obedient and listening and obeying what God told him to do. We would have a totally different story in all of this. I imagine Mary and Joseph walking across this great, vast courtyard, across those huge paver stones that were laid by slave labor under Herod. Just a direct approach right to the entrance of the temple. From the side, here comes a stranger. It would almost look as if he's going to walk right by, but his approach is more direct than that. He comes right to Mary and Joseph. I don't know, parents, if you ever get a little freaked out by this, nothing attracts a crowd like a little baby, especially in a church. And I'm so thankful, Mom and Dad, just a side note, so thankful when you dress baby in blue or pink so that we know if it's a boy or girl, because I hate being embarrassed. She's so cute. Yes, he is 2 months old, so we all made that mistake. Simeon approaches Mary and Joseph. We don't know if there was a conversation. Hey, you don't know who I am, but listen, I'm Simeon, a righteous and devout man who's been waiting for the Messiah to come. We don't know if there's any kind of a conversation. We don't know if Simeon just presumed upon himself and yanked the baby out of her arms. We don't know. But verse 28 says that Simeon took the child in his arms and he praised God, saying, Sovereign Lord, now let your servant die in peace as you have promised. And then Simeon goes on to say something so profound in verse number 30. I have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all people. He is the light to reveal God to the nations, and He is the glory of your people, Israel. Mary listens to all of this. What would you be thinking, Mama? I bet you this has never been said about your child. We've said a lot about our own children. He's a genius. He's brilliant. She's an artist. She can already sing opera. I mean, we say a lot of things about our kids, but that day, Simeon takes this child and says, this is a light to all the nations, to reveal God to the world. Mary had heard enough maybe through others. She started to ponder all these things in her heart, the Word of God says. Now, the incredible thing about Simeon is this. Simeon. This is what separates Simeon from everybody else around the birth of Jesus. Simeon read the same Old Testament passages that the religious leaders did. Simeon read the same Bible that all of the Pharisees read. Simeon was aware of all the prophecies that have been made about the Messiah. He knew them just like the religious people did. He knew them just like the people of Bethlehem did. He knew them just like the people of Jerusalem did. But they all missed the first appearance of Jesus Christ because they weren't looking for him. But Simeon was looking for Jesus. Not only Simeon, and this is entitled All the King's Men, there's another figure that follows right after Simeon. Her name was Anna. She too recognized Jesus as the Messiah because she was looking for Jesus to come. The amazing thing about the birth of Jesus Christ, the Christmas story, is that so many people missed the entrance of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords on planet Earth because this Messiah wasn't born into some royal lineage in the comforts of a palace on a big padded bed. This Messiah was rejected by people laying in a barn in a pile of straw in front of some cattle. This Messiah didn't come into the world like everybody thought he would come into the world, and so the world missed him except for the Magi, the wise men. Simeon and Anna, because they were looking for the Messiah. They were waiting for the Messiah. So many people missed Jesus the first time he came, that very first Christmas. They missed him. Now, my Bible says this: just as Jesus came the first time, born in a manger in the little village of Bethlehem, he's coming back again at the blast of a trumpet and the voice of an archangel. Now, Jesus, years later, Jesus, I think, as an adult now, Jesus recognized how many people missed his first appearance. Oh, maybe it didn't have the same significance. Simeon saw it. Simeon was looking for it. He was eagerly waiting for the Messiah to come. And Jesus understood the plan of God, the plan of salvation. Jesus understood that the life that we live on this earth is not forever and that there's a better place beyond this life. And so I think as Jesus walked amongst the crowds in his ministry, looked amongst all of the people that he served and saw them helpless and hopeless, harassed like sheep without a shepherd, and he didn't want them to miss the next time he came back. And so Jesus, the master communicator, Jesus tells a story. Jesus tells a story to the crowds that day. In fact, it started really with a very innocent comment by one of the disciples. Matthew chapter 24 is where we're going to jump to finish out our story today. At the beginning of Matthew chapter 24, the disciples are walking with Jesus through the very same temple courts Mary and Joseph walked through when he was a little baby. It's a magnificent structure. Imagine this. That it, maybe 30 plus years earlier, Mary and Joseph walking through the temple courts, holding baby Jesus, and this prophecy being made about him being the Messiah. Now, years later, Jesus walks with his disciples on the very same territory. And they get away from the temple a little bit, and it was just this magnificent structure, and one of the disciples said to Jesus, would you look at this thing. Just look at it. You know how guys are. You know how it's amazing how much men can communicate by saying nothing when they just stand outside of some colossal, magnificent, big structure and they're just looking. You know how it is. Yeah. You get another guy over here. There's a whole conversation going on there. You know what I'm talking about, man, right? And they get away from the temple a little bit, and one of them says to Jesus, would you just look at that place? And Jesus says, let me tell you something. The time's going to come when there won't be one stone left on another over there. It's just going to be a pile of rubble. What? It took them 70 years. It's not even done yet. It took them 70 years to build this thing. What do you mean? And so Jesus starts to tell them about the events that will unfold when all of this takes place. And in fact, in about 70 AD, that's exactly what happened to the temple. You can read it in history. Jesus did not want his followers or us to be uninformed about things that were going to happen in the future. So people missed the first coming of Jesus Christ. He did not want us to miss the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I'll talk about that more in just a moment. So Jesus tells a story in Matthew chapter 24, beginning in verse 37. He says, listen, when the Son of Man returns, Jesus himself said, I'm coming back. I'm going to return. Jesus said, when the Son of Man returns, he's coming back again one day. I know maybe you've been in a church and a part of a church, and you've heard people talk about the return of Jesus Christ. You've been to the movie Left Behind. You've read the books. It hasn't happened yet. And somebody gave you a book, 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Come Back in 88. He didn't come back in 88. So then they came out with another book, 89 Reasons Why Jesus Will Come Back in 89. And then there was the 90 book, and there's been all kinds of books, and everybody's absolutely sure that he's coming back, but he hasn't come back yet. So we just kind of, blow it off. But Jesus said, I'm going to return. And I think if Jesus said, I'm coming back, I think he's coming back. So he said, look, it's going to be like it was in Noah's day when I come back. So he's going to tell a story now that they all could identify with this. He got the attention of the people listening to him that day because they knew the story of Moses. They knew it well. In fact, every culture around the world, even today, talks about a story of a great flood. And so Jesus brought his listeners in, just bringing them in. It'll be, when I come back, it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah. Oh, really? What was that like? Well, let me tell you. He says in verse number 38, in those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets, parties, weddings, right up to the time that Noah entered the ark. I thought about this. I thought, you know what? I'll bet you the day that Jesus was born. I'll bet you the day that Jesus was born. And we all know what day Jesus was born, right? Christmas, right? Okay, I just want to see if you're awake today. All right, I'll just keep going. All right. I just lost my train of thought. It's just gone. It's all gone. I bet on the day that Jesus was born, there was parties, there was weddings, and there was banquets. I'll bet you all of those things were going on that day. It was just life as normal. It was just like any other day of the week. It was just like it was the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. It was just an ordinary day. So Jesus brings his listeners in and says, look, when I come back the next time, you know what it's going to be like? Let me tell you what it'll be. It'll be just like it was when Noah built the ark. Can you imagine? Noah's building the ark. That hammer's just going, what you building, Noah? I mean, this is a huge structure. You couldn't miss it, 450 feet long. I mean, it's enormous. I'm building an ark. What's an ark? It's a boat. Oh, why are you building it here? We're like a long ways from the ocean. I know, but water's going to come down here one day and flood the whole earth. Well, how's it going to flood the earth? Well, it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. What's rain? Because they didn't know what rain was yet. Everything was watered from beneath. Well, it's water that comes down from the sky. Oh, that's nice for you, Noah. You just keep doing what you're doing. That's good for you, you know. And they went on with their life, their banquets, their parties, and their weddings. So they did. That's just the way it was. And then one day, something strange started to happen. What's with all of these animals around here all of a sudden? I mean, there's just animals everywhere. I don't know. They're going over there to Noah. You know, just watch where you walk, okay? And they started walking up this board going into the ark, and Noah started arranging things. And that Noah, he's different, right? Okay, just different. And then the rain started to come. I suppose Noah told them that there was a flood coming. I would imagine that he warned them. I would imagine Noah said, listen, the wrath of God is being poured out because of the sinfulness of humanity. In fact, he's grieved that he even made you guys. And so he's going to wipe all this out and start all over. And the only way to be saved is to get on this boat. Oh, that's nice for you, Noah. You just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. Then the first drop of water fell from the sky. And the next, people started to look at one another, wonder what was going on. Until there was a lot of water coming down out of the skies. And it was all very humorous and kind of amazing at first until until there was no place for the water to go. And then the earth began to break apart and the floodwaters came up from the ground below. People now wading about in the water, trying to find their way to that ark. And I can only imagine in my mind's eye that inside of the ark is Noah, his wife, his 3 sons and their wives. And on the outside of the ark, they hear people banging, pounding and banging, let us in, let us in. And they can hear the screams of the people on the outside. I don't know if that's the way it went. I imagine it to be something like that. But it was too late because the door that led to that ark was closed by the hand of God itself. And when God closes a door, no man can open the door. And what God opens, no man can close. Jesus says in verse number 39, that's the way it'll be when the Son of Man comes. Be sudden. Life is normal. Just an ordinary day. Just a very ordinary day. People have been talking about the return of Jesus Christ for a long, long time. In fact, some people just think, in fact, even Peter addressed this over 1,900 years ago in his letter that he wrote. Some people will say, well, where's this return of Jesus that you've been promising? Ever since he left, he hasn't even come back. We don't think it's going to happen. And I've heard people within the church even say similar things. Do you really think Jesus will come back in my lifetime? Church, if I tell you anything else, I am a liar. I have to believe that Jesus could come back today. It might happen before I get done with the sermon. And if you don't believe me and I'm gone, I'll shout from heaven and say, told you. Okay? How many of you think that Christmas will come next year? Raise your hand. Why do you believe Christmas will come next year? A lot of you didn't raise your hand, so I don't know what's going on in your life, but I'm thinking Christmas is coming next year, right? We're going to have Christmas. And we're going to have Christmas next year because it's on the calendar. It's happened just like it has for years before. Every year at the same time. In fact, there's a song about it. Christmas comes at the same time every year. Yeah, it does. I think it's going to come. And as sure as I believe Christmas will be here next year on the 25th of December, 2015, I'm sure Jesus will come because he said he'll come. And then Jesus references something as he goes on, as he's talking to his listeners that day. He references something that we call the rapture. The word rapture never even occurs in the Bible. It's not even there. It comes from the root word rapt, to snatch away, like the raptor bird that swoops down and takes its prey from the ground. Doesn't even know what happened to it. We call it a rapture, a snatching away. So Jesus makes reference to this. Look, he says, when I come back, it's going to be just like it was in the days of Noah, just an ordinary day, just an ordinary day. He goes on in verse number 40, he says, look, 2 men will be working together in the field. I think Jesus meant to say oil field here. And he said one of them is going to be taken and the other left. You're a floor hand out there, you're swinging pipe around, you're chaining it up, and all of a sudden you look around for the other guy that's supposed to help you, and he's gone. He's just gone. Where is he? He's just gone. What do you mean gone? He's gone. Jesus illustrates it again in the very next word. He says, it's about 2 women. He says, look, 2 women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken and the other one left. 2 women in the routine of the day, the regular activities. It's shopping, it's coffeeing together, it's conversing, it's working side by side with somebody in the desk next to you, whatever it might be. Gone. Just gone. No explanation. They're just gone. And Jesus said this. Jesus is the one telling the story. Not one of the disciples, not somebody in history later after Jesus. This is the words of Jesus himself. This is what he said. And then Jesus brings a conclusion to the whole thought in the very next verse, verse number 42. So you too. Here's the application for us. Jesus makes application of his own principle in this. So you too must, say it with me, keep watch. Why? Well, because you don't know the day the Lord's coming. Yeah, I do. I read a book. Yeah, I do. I watched this preacher on TV, and he said that when this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and that war starts, and this thing happens, and that guy comes a leader, and the Antichrist, and this, and this, and this, then he'll come. Well, those might be some of the signs leading up to it, but you still don't know what day he's going to come. So you just got to keep watching. You just got to keep watching, because you just don't know when he's going to come back. No matter how much you study it, argue it with books, read about it. We just don't know. Verse number 43, I love the application to this. This is great. So Jesus wants us to really understand what he's talking about. So he says, look, understand this. If a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would, say it with me, keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. What a great principle is involved there, you know? Somebody here in this room, somebody here just got magnificent Christmas gifts this year, didn't you? You just got phenomenal stuff. You didn't get the Chia Pet. You wanted the Chia Pet, but instead you got like a 120-inch 4K TV, right? I don't know if they even make them that big. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be great? 10 foot from corner to corner. All the men said? There's no man on this side. That's awesome. So I say to Ron, I know that you got this big TV set for Christmas. I'm coming at 3 a.m. to rip you off. I want the TV. I'm going to steal it. Now I'm warning him. And Ron knows at the hour I'm coming. And when I get to Ron's house at 3 a.m., I open the door, and there is Ron standing there with Mr. Winchester. He's awaiting. He's awaiting for me to come. Jesus said, if you know I'm coming, then you better be ready when I'm coming. You better be waiting right by the door, just like the homeowner would be if he knew when the burglar was going to come. That's exactly what he's saying. Now, in case we missed the principle, Jesus states it for us again. Verse number 44. You also, you might not be a homeowner, but like that homeowner, you got to, say it with me, be ready. All the time. All the time, because the Son of Man will come when least expected. Do you know why you got caught doing things that you weren't supposed to be doing? Because somebody walked in when you least expected them to walk in. If you had expected them to walk in, you wouldn't have been doing what you were doing. I mean, it's not rocket science. And the very first Christmas that came along, the very first Christmas, the birth of the Messiah. This is the Messiah for which Israel had been waiting for nearly 2,000 years. And they missed it. Except Simeon. Simeon was eagerly waiting. He was watching. He was looking for something that nobody else was looking for. And because of that, he experienced the very first Christmas. Jesus totally caught everybody off guard because they were looking for something that caught them off guard. In fact, years later in Jesus' ministry, this is what I love. The religious leaders, the men who should have known better, who had pored over the scriptures to know who Jesus was so that when he came on the scene, they would have recognized him. And Jesus doing all of these miracles. Jesus is doing Jesus stuff. He's doing the work of God. And the people that should have known better totally missed it because they were looking for the wrong thing. They were looking for some majestic, messianic king sitting on some throne, born into royalty, not understanding that Jesus came from royalty through the lineage of David and through the priesthood of Eliezer. They didn't know that he came that way. And so they said, where's the Messiah supposed to come from? Well, he's supposed to come from Bethlehem, but this guy doing all the miracles, he came from Nazareth. Well, that's where he grew up, but that's not where he was born. And they missed it because they were looking for the wrong things. Well, what are we supposed to do with all of this? What do we do with this? How do we make this practical in our own lives? Let me ask you this. Imagine what life would feel like if every day, when every day can feel very difficult, every day there was the expectation, you know what? Today might be the day when Jesus just extracts me out of all of this. Can you imagine? I just want to see the look on our faces. I want to see the look on our faces the moment we go from earth to glory. I think there's going to be a moment of just like, Pastor was right for once. I mean, here we are. He was right. We made it home. What if every day we prepared for an eternity that's much longer than we think? We tend to live this life like this life is forever and eternity is just a short period of time. Listen, you're going to go stay in a hotel room somewhere, and before you go to the hotel room, you don't stop off at Walmart and buy some pictures and throw rugs and lamps to put in the room. You're only spending the night there. You don't decorate it like you're staying a long, long time, but we tend to do that with life. I'm telling you, what if we began to live every day, thinking today might be the day. Housewife, mom, student, listen to me. When you feel in just the lowest spot and you feel so overlooked and forgotten, and there's the pain of what's happening at home with parents and the arguing and the fighting, and in your mind you encourage yourself saying, Jesus, today could be the day when it all changes because you made it happen. What if our world started to look that way? What if the world leaders started to say, you know what, Jesus might come back today. Maybe we should think a little differently about how we lead the nations. What if the church sat at the edge of its seat every day thinking today might be the Jesus day that when he comes back. Today might be the day when Jesus comes back. I wonder if the church really believed it. If this pastor really believed it, I wonder if we'd start to evangelize different. I wonder if our programs would be different. I wonder if our purposes would be different. I wonder if we would stop complaining and grumbling when it's too hot or too cold. I wonder if we'd start to think different if we understood Jesus might come back before the day's end. It would change perspective and attitude, wouldn't it? All change. As I finish, let me ask you this question. It's kind of a fun question to ask. How many have ever been somewhere you didn't want to be? Raise your hand. I think all of us, right? It was probably camping, right? You're probably camping. Either that or at a Packers football game, one of the two. I don't know. And you just endured wherever it was that you were. And we could all go, as I asked the question, you all have a story. For me, it was my babysitters, or it was a camping trip, or it was a trip to this place, or maybe it was this last week with the in-laws. I don't know, but it was just, you were someplace you didn't want to be there, and all you could think is, I just want to go. I just want to go home. I just want to go home. You remember places like that as a kid? You had to go stay with family or relatives or friends, and mom and dad were gone, and you just knew mom and dad are supposed to be back on Thursday. They're going to be back on Thursday. What day is it? Monday. And you waited. What day is it? It's Tuesday. Oh, you got to wake up 2 more times, whatever the case is, and you waited and waited until finally the news came. Hey, I think I see your parents' car. Yeah! You just went absolutely brain dead in that moment. Yeah! You just scream, run back and forth. You're going home. The bags are packed. You're by the front door. Let's go. Okay? Or it's a camping trip. It's a camping trip. Listen, camping is just nature's way of promoting hotel industry. That's all it is. It's just nobody likes to camp. Nobody likes to camp, right? Am I right? I'm right. So if you're camping, you take me along. We're going to go on a hunting or a fishing trip, and let's take Pastor along. It'll just be a great bonding time with Pastor. The whole time that we're camping, hunting for those bears or gooses or fishes or whatever it is you want to shoot at or poke. I don't know. The whole time I'm going to be thinking, I just want to go home. Just want to go home. Just want to go home. Until then, just give me a candy bar to eat. I'll be good. All right? So I don't know where you are today. I don't know where you are in life. I don't know how this affects you today, but I just want to tell you that today is not forever, that one day we're going to go home, and home is a better place. You're not home. Jesus says, I'm going to return. I'm coming back. I'm going to return. And when I come back, it's just going to be an ordinary day. It's going to be a day like any other day. You're going to get up. You're going to push the alarm clock. You're going to jump to your feet. You're going to roll out of bed and fall on the floor, however you get up in the bed in the morning. It's going to be an ordinary day like any other day. But when you roll out of bed, when you start walking down the hallways to that school, when you get in the car or the truck and then you're on your way to work, in the back of your mind, you got to be thinking, today might be the day Jesus comes back. Because he said he's coming back. When you lay your head on the pillow at night, you need to be thinking, I might not awaken in the morning to see this bedroom. I might wake up in the presence of God. Isn't that a thought? Isn't that a thought? That's just a thought, man. We'll all be standing there going, no eye has seen, no ear has heard. It hasn't even entered into the heart of man the things that God has stored up for those who love him. We can't begin to describe or explain heaven. And if there's been any accounts of what heaven was like, if somebody had near-death experiences or whatever, I don't know if they got a full glimpse or just a pinhole glimpse into the glories of heaven. So for all of these things, we're going to pray today that when Jesus comes back, you're eagerly waiting, you're looking, you're ready, and you're waiting for Jesus to come back.